Oh, hi. Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about real GDP as an economic indicator for a country's economic performance. As you all by now should know, real GDP measures the total market value of all final goods and services produced within an economy over a given period of time using the base year prices to evaluate the goods and services produced. Now, why we use real values? The reason is because when we try to compare across time, right, how a country's GDP has increased from one year to the next, any increase, right, in nominal value could have come from production increases or dollar value increases that came from higher prices. So in order to eliminate such price changes, right, economists use what is called real values, which only use base year prices. This way, any increase in real GDP must have come from actual increases in production. Now, today's focus, right, is less about the real part, but more about when I try to compare across countries. So when economists compare the economic performance of country A versus country B, right, each country's GDP will be measured in its own domestic currency. In order for a meaningful comparison, we often convert at least one of these two countries' GDP values in its own currency to a common currency, and often we use the US dollar. Now, what you see here, right, on the screen is a table showing Chinese GDP measured in US dollar, presumably because we want to compare across other countries. So we had to convert the Chinese GDP in Chinese yuan to US dollar based on the prevailing exchange rate across the different years shown in the table. Now, then what you see here is something really interesting. You see that in 2021, right, China experienced a very rapid economic growth. That's probably because of recovery from COVID recession, right? That sounds reasonable. But if you look at the 2023 data, right, you see that China's economy, right, actually gone into a negative growth, meaning they actually gone into a recession in that year. Now, did China actually go into a recession? Well, certainly the numbers suggest that, right? Now, what if I show you another table now of the same data about Chinese GDP over the same 4 years, except we're now measuring in Chinese yuan rather than in US dollars. Now, what you see is a rather different picture. The first thing you would note, right, is that in 2023, right, the Chinese economy grew, right, by actually 5% instead of a negative growth of 0.1%, right? And this is because, right, the Chinese yuan had depreciated against the US dollar over that period of time. So any increase in GDP, in real values, in terms of Chinese yuan, right, would actually end up showing as a smaller amount in terms of US dollars simply because of the yuan depreciation. Now compare the 2021 data. You see that in 2021 data, right, the under US dollar measure, the Chinese GDP had increased by 21.2%. That's a huge improvement in the economic performance. However, if you look at the yuan value, right, it's actually only at 13.3%, suggesting that a big chunk of the increase when measured in US dollar was attributed to the appreciation of the Chinese yuan, right? So when using real GDP figures to compare growth rate of an economy, be extra careful, right, to see whether the underlying growth rates were calculated based on values that were quoted in a country's own currency or were quoted in a common currency. Once it is quoted in a common currency, then we have to account for any changes in exchange rate that might have occurred, right? And this could lead to a rather misleading conclusion for us. All right, I hope you understand that, and until the next video, see ya.